Hello, everybody, and welcome again. Another office hours. Club Matt here, taking on the APJ hours as per usual here, working on the continuing saga of Wavefront and vRealize operations. So it's just me here so far here today. Clement has volunteered perhaps in August to take these on. For the other ones, Will has been doing a lot of the Americas EMEA one. Will Rodbard, great guy, very knowledgeable, and he's been doing a great job of that. So you'll start to see more team members, maybe doing a little bit more in the for the office hours and stuff like that. So for our webinars, we do have a good one coming up next week. Oracle. Uh, which I think will be good. I did manage to get an agent running and an IS installed on one of these Microsoft Windows machines, which I think is really good. See what else we can do. It was a show detail. So I just started this and just now, so there's not going to be a lot of metrics as there were on here, but definitely something going, and that's really good. I don't know how we get this to show over here. Again, I'm not a wavefront expert by any stretch of the imagination. Let's see if we're still monitoring our SDDC. I should have came in here earlier, actually. I was looking to see where our memory utilization was when we cleared some stuff out. We're at 63%. That's really good to see. So we're still working on that. Well, welcome, Clement. Good to see you made it out.
Yeah, hey Matt.
So yeah, I was just continuing the ongoing saga of Matt versus VROPS and Wavefront. I guess it's not versus. Things seem to be working out well as we continue to do some more integrations and trying things out. So I was able to actually get the Wavefront data coming into VROPS for the application, which I think is kind of cool. So playing along with that. Let's see, CPU demand. And again, I just added this, so it's possible that not a lot of the metrics have started to come in. Oh, it shows where it is and everything. Pretty nifty. So what's going on in APJ land?
Yeah, we're getting more customers onboarded, and it's chugging along. We've got a lot of customers at the moment who are still in that 3 to 10 host kind of category, but we're waiting for our customers to really start expanding into the platform and grow along with the capacity. But yeah,
So,
it's
stupid question. Do pretty much all the APJ customers deploy into the Sydney region then, or are they
yeah,
kind
all
of
the customers so far have deployed
okay?
into the Sydney region at this stage. I think a lot of the conversations that we have with the customers are relating to data sovereignty, and I mean, even in Australia, it seems a lot of our banks, a lot of our customers are still wanting to keep that data within the country.
Hmm.
So, mm,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I guess it's understandable. We see that across the board with a lot of customers. And definitely in regions outside the United States. The United States is, I guess, a lot of countries outside of some European ones, but for the most part, just want to keep it out of the United States as opposed to in their own region. But that's another
yeah,
conversation. But yeah, that's
quite
what
it's
I
quite
found.
typical, I think. Yeah,
Like I said, outside of like perhaps like Germany, that's why we launched Frankfurt because they have a lot of laws around keeping their data within their borders. So I just want to see if starting to pull anything out here. It's possible. Like I said, I just turned this on. So what's the primary challenges you're seeing out in that region? Is it the traditional network connectivity sizing type conversations?
given the size of our customers at the moment, I think scale is less of a concern to us right now. One of the concerns, I don't know whether or not you could call it a concern or not. I guess one of the issues that have been brought up with some existing customers is that they expect somewhat the experience of VMC to be pretty much identical to that of an on-premises environment. Now, I mean, I think the answer to that is that although we try to make the experience pretty much the same, but I guess the whole idea of VMC and the consumption model is different to what is on premises, and we try to make the platform easy for customers to consume. So, although the tooling and the platform and a lot of the UI is the same across the two environments, it's not really an identical experience per se. So one example is NSX. We have a customer who wanted to talk to us about having the same sort of, I guess, the UI, the same sort of features that they're used to in on-premises NSX. So as we all know, that probably is not something that we have now, or we would even look to do in the future. Given that, like I said, it's different consumption model altogether.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's a good valid point. It's the same, but it's different. And yeah, there's definitely some caveats around it. Is data center, capacity cost a big concern for customers out in that region?
Um, yeah, I guess so. A lot of the customers in Sydney are looking, or are currently on hosted environments. I think we're starting to see a few of those exploring the idea of having VMC as a potential or alternative to that, given it might be cost or just for whatever other reason they want to bring some of those controls in house. But we're seeing some of that in terms of cost. I don't think that is really at the forefront of the conversations at this stage, but it always is a factor. I'm sure.
Yeah, true enough. True enough. Now, I guess also for that region is the use case of perhaps those customers, people in APJ trying to get, closer to other regions by deploying in, Europe or United States or Singapore, or to kind of reach, get a little bit better local capacity, as it were, as opposed to trying to stretch things back to the continent.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and to be honest, when I started out, I thought that would be a very fairly big use case. Customers wanting to do exactly that. Um, but right now, what we're seeing in with our customer base is that they're just really expansions of their current, whether it be a host environment or a solely internally managed data center. They're really just looking at VMC for additional capacity. Um, DR is surprisingly still not a huge use case that we're seeing that is driving our customers' adoption. But really, it's just for expansion and pretty much just a data exit strategy. We also have some customers who are looking to go. They have a pretty much a cloud strategy from the executive level, and they see VMC as an option there as well. So that's good to see that.
That's good. We got David joining in, and yeah, for anybody on Twitch, and it looks like the Zoom invite's all screwed up. I'll have to try to fix this next week. We might have to just cancel the one we've already got out there and recreate, because I believe that's a different meeting ID that's in the invitation.
Yeah, I tried to join a few times.
Yeah, I've been fighting this every week, and every week I get have the same problem, and I managed to get something. And yes, we see you, David. We know you're in. Yeah, it's not the same number at all. Okay, well, that's a problem for me to sort out. But yeah, yeah, no, it's I guess maybe that'll come with time. Especially maybe the desktop as a service stuff, as that starts to get more prevalent. I guess that might be a better use case for kind of stretching out there. Or maybe not. I guess I don't know, but that seems to be one for me anyway. Um, yeah, things on this side. It's not the pond. What do we call the Pacific side? Because the pond is kind of the Atlantic. That's what we use as a.
The Pacific side, oh yeah.
Like we always say, over the pond, but we always refer to that being the Atlantic side over to Europe. But I don't know if we have.
The Antipodean side.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I think that's a very common term in the UK to call the Aussies the Antipodeans.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'll ever remember that or pronounce that correctly. So I'll have to come
I
up with
don't even
something
know if I'm
better.
pronouncing it properly.
I don't know. Maybe we got the pond on one side and the lake on the other. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know where this meeting invite's coming from. All right. Well, I will fix this after the meeting, and I'll fix it because that might be why we're not getting as many people into the Zoom because that one's not really working. Actually, I'm gonna fix that now so you guys talk. Come up with something idea. Tell me about something interesting that you've had. Actually, you know what, David? It might be, the conversation we were having last night slash this afternoon. Might be interesting. Do you think maybe you could share your screen and maybe show what we were talking about with the vSAN reservations and stuff like that? Because that could be useful for people to understand what they see in vSAN, as opposed to, what they think they're allocating.
Oh yeah, okay, sure. One sec.
All right, so I'll stop sharing. And do you want to share that out then? Break this up. Break this.
So Clement, yesterday you checked with Matt around the vSAN reservation.
Yeah, and I didn't have some great answers, but I was kind of on the right path.
Yeah.
But hopefully, Clement can show us what he's got and talk us through some of it because I think it's very beneficial.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that there's no customer details on there.
Yeah, no, good idea. Good idea.
You can use our own lab SDDC or
I guess yeah, you could just show it in our org, really, perhaps, or I guess our org's not showing it necessarily. Okay. Why is that not coming in as a clickable link now? I'm still fighting invites here as well, so good times. Change it here.
yeah, Matt, when I try to connect using the link, in the
Yeah, I
meeting
know it
message.
says register now. Did it say that to you?
Yes, every time
Yeah, I know.
I
It
have
does
to
the same to
refresh.
me. And then I log into Zoom, and then
Yeah.
I start it from there. But then, yes, it's a different meeting ID. So I'm just updating
Yep.
the invite now because, yeah, that's probably a very good reason why we're not getting attendance in there. I wonder why that link's not clickable. All right, take it away, Clement. You're muted if you're talking. I don't know if you are or not. Maybe just winding up.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, now we hear you.
Yeah, it's actually I've got two Zoom meetings and I'm trying to unmute one of them. I think it's the wrong one I'm unmuting. I don't know which one is which. I know if I try to close one of them, it's just going to disappear on me this whole session. So
So how you can attend two meetings at the same time?
no, it's one is a live meeting and one of them is actually just opened. So I
Okay,
don't know
I
which
see.
one is which, and I don't want to close the wrong one.
Okay.
But anyway, as Matt was mentioning yesterday, we had a question from a customer about the capacity overview that they see in the vSphere web client. It's what you see on the screen at the moment, and what I've noticed is that I looked into it yesterday, both within VMC and also in the lab, and I noticed that it is different. I think it's the version of vSphere that gets used in VMC, and the actual dashboard shows different information. But what you see on the screen here is what you see in VMC. And if you look at the capacity overview here, this is taken just from our lab. You can see that 1.26 terabytes is used out of the 10 terabyte roughly usable data that's in VMC at the moment for our lab. And what was interesting was the two values underneath, which says actually written and reserved. The question was, what exactly do these mean, and when is it that the reserves, I guess the reserve total is going to go up when I deploy new VMs? Is that going to go up? How is it possible for me to forecast usage? If we're not sure what that reserve total is. So what I did was do some quick tests. As I guess a vanilla SDDC deployment in the lab. I guess when I say vanilla, I mean vanilla as in the SDDC itself, and turned on some features such as HCX and SRM. The first thing I did was to try and find out what the reserved total was, and what I found was that when I actually looked into it, it was supposed to be an allocated amount of storage that vSAN is allocated for example, if it was something like a thick provision disk, it would show up as a reserved storage capacity that wasn't actually written to. So if I had a VM, I guess in other words, that I deployed into the environment, and let's say the VM was 100 gig, that VM, if I loaded an OS in there, and let's just say that VM used, say, 10 gig of the capacity, then that 10 gig would show up as the actually written section of that total, where you see on the left. And then the 90% is going to be written as or it's going to be tallied up into the reserved section. I guess just for everyone's information, when we deploy thick provision in VMC, it's going to be a lazy zero provisioning process. So that's the default actual vSAN storage policy in VMC. And so that 90 gig is going to show up in reserved. That was really good. So now we knew what is those two totals and what made up the actual combinations of those totals. So the next thing was, okay, if I had a vanilla install of the SDDC, and I went through all the VMs that were in our lab, and I checked that all of the actual VMs and their virtual disks were using the default storage policy, the vSAN storage policy, which was thin provision. The question was after that, why is it that there's still 66 gigs reserved for VMs that are actually all compliant with the storage policy of thin provisioning? One thing to note also as well, when I say thin provisioning, it's when you create a storage policy, you'll see that under an advanced tab for vSAN, I think vSAN configuration, when you look at the per VM's storage-based policies.
Yeah, I'm just bringing that up on my screen real quick while you're talking here. So
okay, can you maybe show it? I don't know.
I'm not sure. People on the stream can see it. Maybe if you can, yeah, do you want to maybe open up VMC as well, just so you could... Actually, we'll finish what you're talking about, and then we can go back and show the storage policies.
We can go back to that, yeah. So,
yeah.
So the when you create a storage policy for any environment, it's not just VMC specific, but when you specify a vSAN storage policy, you go into the one of the advanced properties, and for the disk provisioning, you can select what we call the OSR. So the OSR is, now I'm trying to remember from yesterday. I've got the worst memory in the world. Something storage reservation of some sort, but it's basically a percentage of reservation that you want the disk to actually, I guess, hold on to or pre-allocate at the deployment stage. So if I was to deploy, again, let's just take the example of a 100 gig virtual machine or a virtual disk. If I set an OSR to 50% for my storage policy and applied that storage policy to that VM, then that VM would have 50% or 50 gigs of reserved storage. that I guess vSAN just puts away and doesn't allow anyone else to use in for future deployment, and reserves that. What the guest VM uses is going to be different, obviously. Again, if it uses 10 gig, in that case, it would have 40 gigs of reserved memory still left in the environment. So that's what it is, the OSR. So going back to the point where I was saying, we in our lab, we have pretty much a vanilla deployment, and there shouldn't be any reserved element in there because all the VMs had a default storage policy of thin provision, and nothing was reserved. There shouldn't be anything reserved. I then went back and had a look at some of our management infrastructure, and it looked like that all the components, for instance, vCenter and NSX, all of those components didn't have any storage reservation, but the HCX fleet appliances did. In particular, the WAN optimization took up pretty much the bulk of that reservation, that 60 gig. So at least then we knew what was taking up that capacity. And just to confirm that, what I did was what I did was basically I changed the service mesh and removed the WAN optimization. And as soon as the service mesh deleted that VM, the WAN optimization VM, I think I might have it here. There's a different screenshot, but yeah, that reserved total went straight back down to I think about 6 gigabytes or something like that, to 0.02%. So then I was sure that it was the HCX fleet appliances. So anyway, just to cap that off, what I was talking about, these are just sort of screenshots of what I was saying before. If I add a 1 terabyte VM with thick provisioning, you can see the reserved value goes up from 66 gigs to pretty much 1.07 terabytes. If I add a thin provisioned disk or VM with 1 terabyte, you see pretty much nothing changes because it was just pretty much an empty shell. I created an empty virtual machine. There's actually no data in it. So actual written and reserve pretty much stayed at the values what they were before. And if I create one at 50%, what was interesting in VMC was actually when I tried to create a storage policy of 50% OSR, it said to me, or the UI mentioned that none of the storage data stores were compatible with that storage policy. So it seems to me like that you either set it for thin provision or you set it to thick provision, and those are the only compatible levels for VMC anyway. So that was interesting. That's something that I can confirm a bit further. But yeah, that's exactly the symptoms that I got. That's it, really, Matt.
No, that's really good. If maybe we want to hop to showing some of these, and so there's also a couple other scenarios where people have to be careful for the provisioning, particularly around HCX. There is an option, and I believe it's a default option, is to either maintain or make the target a thick disk on the VMC side. And if you select that, it's incredibly difficult to actually remediate that. So it's always very important that when you're doing your migrations via HCX that you pick thin provision if that's indeed what you want. That's where I've seen this come up primarily, is customers that did a big migration and then kind of realized afterwards that everything was thicked, and that's not a very easy thing to fix. So, but yeah, if you wanted to maybe show the storage profiles.
Yep, I'll just do that. I'll share. I'm always very careful with sharing screens because I'm one of those people that always have a million screens open and gosh knows what's on there. Nothing devious, but could be any work related or anything else. Let's see. So this one. You should be able to see our lab environment. Is that, you seeing that, the storage policies?
I am, yes.
Okay, cool. So just to just to show you what I was referring to before, is that if I go, well, let's go back a little bit. By default, these are pretty much the storage policy. Oh, actually, this is an on-prem environment. Let me. It doesn't really matter. By default, there's a vSAN default storage policy that gets created in vSAN for VMC, and that's the default storage policy that gets applied to virtual machines in that environment. If you need to or you want to, let's just say, for argument's sake, I did want to change a storage policy for something thick provision. Let's say I want some disks that are thick provision, which is kind of which is unusual these days. I mean, it's uncommon these days, I should say, because of the fact that most disks are flash disks. The difference between thick and thin provisioning is I guess a whole lot less impact to what it was before, prior to the SSDs. But if I create a new storage policy here, I can go into here and enable the rules for vSAN storage. This is where you specify the failure to tolerates. The site disaster recovery is per site failure. So I think they call that in a stretch cluster the SFTT, if I remember correctly, in I guess in vSAN terminology. And the PFTT is the mirroring, and the RAID 5, RAID 6, and that type of erasure coding. What I was talking about before was the advanced policy rules. Inside there was object space reservation. So I was pretty much off. I think I said storage reservation, but space reservation, object space reservation. You can select thin provisioning there and thick provisioning there. So if I say thick provisioning, I'll show you what I was mentioning before. This is actually our on-premises environment, so it won't have that error before that I was talking about in VMC, where I mentioned that if I was to select the 25% reservation or the 50% or the 75%, it would show that the what we have is the workload data store inside of VMC showed that they weren't compatible data stores for that configuration. So I could really only choose the thin provisioning or the thick provisioning. And that's pretty much all. Once you've done that, you go ahead and finish that off, and it'll create the new storage policy for you. It's quite interesting to talk about vSAN at the moment, because if anyone knows me who was listening, I'm pretty much a network guy through and through, and to be talking about vSAN is kind of an interesting one for me. But yeah, it's good. It's all good. It's pretty easy to understand. If I can understand this stuff, then anyone can. That's pretty much it.
Oh, that was actually really, like I said, very informative, and it's very, very, very important for customers, like I said, to kind of get this stuff right and to think about it. So you kind of talked a little bit about some of this, but there's also these policies change depending on the number of hosts you have, correct? So, or what's available to you in the storage policies from a RAID perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the most key part there to really know is that once you go up to 6 hosts, to file against our SLA, you need a FTT of 2. So do you maybe want to show them where that is? Did you cover that at all? Did we look at that?
Let me have a quick search. That's somewhere just on the
Yeah, no.
web.
So if you go to create VM or VM storage policy, or you can edit any of the ones on there.
Oh, it shows you on the UI, does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes, it shows you the FTT, the failures to tolerate, but it doesn't show you when you need to go up. That's something we're working on still.
Okay, cool. One sec. Let me just go back to it. When I create the storage policy, so let's just create another one. So enable vSAN storage. The vSAN, and we've got the SR, which is this is the site recovery. What you want to do across the 2 availability zones in terms of failure to tolerate, and this is the one that that's other options for the intra AZ or failure, I guess. any fault domains within the one single data center. So we have the RAID 1, which is the standard mirroring, as we kind of all know. And RAID 5 and RAID 6 is not it's not anything new either for the people who understand the parity type of failure, where you will lose pretty much one drive out of the four, or the capacity of roughly 33%. I shouldn't say loss, but that gets used up as redundancy for your actual VMDK. But you need 4 hosts, as Matt said, for RAID 5, and for RAID 6, if I remember correctly, you'll need 6.
Yeah,
and then
and you
you
can
also
see that 2 failures next to the RAID 1, RAID 6. That's what we're talking about, the failures to tolerate. So that when you go to 6 hosts, your policy needs to be at that 2 failures for either RAID 6 or RAID 1, and RAID 6 is more efficient for storage utilization, whereas there's some use cases where you want to still use RAID 1, particular to some databases and such. But yeah, you need to kind of know that so that when you go beyond 6 hosts, that needs to be changed from the default.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's probably worth noting that if you did have a stretch cluster, then you would need pretty much 6 hosts on either side, because it's, as I mentioned earlier on, it's failure within the data center itself. So you want 6 on each side for Azure coding RAID 6.
Yeah, I don't know if we lost you there, Clement, or you just stopped talking, but
Oh, really?
oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying that for RAID 6, to be able to tolerate 2 failures, that will be per DC, if you like. So in a stretch cluster, it would be per availability zone.
Yeah, that is correct. So, and I don't think we have anybody that goes up to 3 failures, but it's nice to know it's in there, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty much what,
That would be a lot of capacity used up.
200%?
Yeah, but that's
200.
actually, if you click on it, it should tell you. Yeah,
Yeah, it can show you.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
click on it. Yeah, you'll see.
So 100 gig VM would take.
4. Wow, 4x. Interesting.
Yeah, because there's 3 failures, so you've actually got 4 mirrors of the same data.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of overhead probably as well on the system. But
You'd want that to be a pretty important VM.
that
Using
would
that
have
sort
to
of stuff.
be, yes, indeed. At that point, it's probably better just to have a backup strategy as opposed to
Yeah,
configuring for 3 failures.
like I've never seen anyone use that. That is crazy.
Yeah, there's probably somebody that is doing it, and we probably just offended them. Um, but yeah, like I said, at this point, 2 failures is, quote unquote, our best practice for large environments. That's why we kind of mandate it
Yeah.
once you go up. And as you see with RAID 6, it's actually not that bad. It's a 50%. And it's, that's their recommended number. And that's something to be stick with. And that's even a little bit overly cautious, but it's good to be cautious with the data. But I think at 3 failures, yeah, I mean, a good backup strategy, I think, is probably better in that case. Because if you have 3 failures, something's probably really wrong. Um, but yeah, all right. Well, thank you for taking us through the commit. That's really that was informative. I think that's all. I didn't have much else to go on today. Like I said, I was just kind of playing around with my wavefront integrations. David, you got anything you wanted to discuss?
Oh, sorry. I just want to unmute. Yeah. And what's the default storage policy for the 3 node cluster in
RAID
VMC?
failures to tolerate 1, RAID 5.
Okay. If we get like if customer keep adding, when they add another 2 or 3 hosts, for example, they got 6 nodes in total in the cluster. So the customer, they can change the policy by themselves or
They
create
can.
a policy.
So if you go into there, Clement, you can click on the policy, the vSAN default storage policy. So this is what you would edit. That is the biggest mouse cursor I've ever seen.
Mm.
Man, anyway, so yeah, you go to edit settings, and you see it's basically like configuring it again, but you'd go into here. not sure
Yep.
why ours is it. Oh, ours is a RAID 1 because this is a 1 node, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So
plus, this is not VMC anyway.
yeah.
This is from our
This
on-premises.
is the on-premise. Okay.
Oh,
So
so you would just click that drop down from one failure RAID 1 to 2 RAID 6, right? And then you would go
Yep.
through the rest of the wizard, and if you cancel out of this, Clement, what you would see then is if you clicked on VM compliance there,
Yeah.
yeah, right there, you may need to run a check compliance for it to show, but what you'll actually see is them all fall out of compliance. And you can either select some and remediate them, or you can reapply the storage policy. We generally recommend not to bomb the update out to everything at the same time, because there is obviously some overhead that goes along with changing all of this. Depending on how many VMs you have and all these kinds of things, it can cause yourself a little bit of a problem. I mean, the chances of you causing yourself a problem are actually fairly slim, but we just want people to be on the safe side. So you can actually select a few and then select apply policy, and then you go from there. And a lot of times, yeah, you have to do it from this screen. Actually, if you go to the host and cluster screen, might be a little bit easier in there, because you can just kind of click on the cluster and then click on the VMs, or click on the host. I guess it doesn't really matter for our case here.
On the host.
Yeah, if you click on the host, I guess click the cluster. This is a 4 node. When did that happen?
This is the lab.
Oh, this is the lab. Okay, so if you click on VMs there, I don't know why that's RAID 1 there.
VMs. Yep.
Yeah. So in here you can kind of bulk select. So
Yep.
click something, and then click shift, and then you should be able to.
There you go.
Yeah. So if you right click now, um,
This is an RDP session, so it should still work.
yeah. So then you can see
Yep.
there's a
Yep.
vSAN option down at the bottom. Oh, right there. So
Right.
you can hit reapply storage for your VM policy.
Yep.
So that's a way you can do it in smaller chunks, which is usually what we recommend doing.
Mhm.
If you only have a few VMs, not a big deal. But that's how you would do it. You would basically go in, modify the default policy. All the VMs will fall out of compliance. You then reapply the policy, and it'll change everything to.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this should relatively do
Because
nothing.
everything's compliant anyway.
I don't know why it's RAID 1 in here, to be honest, actually. It should probably be RAID 6. So,
Yeah, it's a
maybe
good
just
point actually.
maybe
We
just
use
an
quite a lot
oversight
of,
on our side, but I don't know why we haven't done that.
Mm.
I'm just trying to think of a reason why we wouldn't have done that. I can't
Well, we
think.
don't at the moment. We don't really have any storage issues yet. But
Yeah,
that's
we
a
got
good
lots
point
and
to
lots of
make.
capacity, so maybe that's why we just left it as it was. But anyway, that's how
I
you
mean,
would
possible,
do it.
like you said, you might the lab might have started off with less labs, and it was kind of added. It was never changed.
No, we started with 4.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. To be honest, I don't know why we didn't do that. Again, like I said, it's just probably a pure oversight on our side. But again, it's not biting us yet. But anyway, that's how you would do it. And one thing we're working on as well is a alert that shows in the console when you've gone to the 6th host to update the storage policy with a link to documentation. It's something I'm working with our UI team on, because I'm not sure all of our customers are actually keenly aware of that. So um, but that's why I always like to bring that up, and it was good that you guys were around to walk us through that, and this is very good to understand. Like I said, it's just fairly easy to do, and like I said, it's even easier if you just click in the vSAN settings, that reapply policy, and it'll bomb it to everything. And it does do it as a background process, but like I said, there is some overhead that goes along with it. So.
Yep. It's pretty good. The other note also I wanted to make really quickly is that this is the on-premises environment. Remember, I mentioned the capacity, vSAN capacity overview. The dashboard looks a little bit different. So that's what it looks like here on premises. It's a different version of vSphere and vSAN, and but it pretty much has the same information.
Yep. So that's good. So I think anything else, David, that covered kind of what you were kind of wanting to see or no?
The default we just mentioned, the default storage policy, the RAID 5 and the fault tolerance is 1, right? And so no matter how many hosts in the cluster, right? Always that's a default policy.
Unless it's a one node, yes. So one node comes with RAID 1.
Yeah.
3 node and above will always create out at. So this is actually an interesting point because say you wanted to provision 8 hosts. This actually came up with a customer, and I had a discussion with somebody on our Octo team actually around this. So one of our customers was intending to build 10 hosts, but when you actually go to provision an SDDC, the most you can provision on the SDDC creation is 6 if you do multi SDDC or 4 if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have to provision out 4, which will create that FTT1 RAID 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you do is you go in and you click add host to get all your capacity up. Yeah, it will not change that policy for you.
Okay.
So, like that's why I always like to kind of bring that up, especially if we know a customer is going to go above 6. Is that because of the way we create the SDDCs, it's not going to native create that way. Somebody has to go in and modify this afterwards, and they can do it right off the bat. They can create a 4-node SDDC, go right in before they provision anything else in, and do to change the default storage policy, and then they're good. Well, actually, no. They'll need to get to 6 hosts to be able to hit the FTT2 and RAID 6.
Yes.
So
yes.
they do that, and so that's what the recommended way of doing things is: get to the 6, set your storage policy right away, start filling it up, and then you can add more as you kind of go. That's kind of how I would recommend customers do it. But I'm sure if we did an analysis, there's probably a few customers out there that haven't done this, and that's something we should probably chase down to make sure they're aware.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for sharing this experience.
No problem. That's what I'm here for. This is what office hours is about, David. This is what it's about. For everybody. All right, so I don't have anything else. I think we did a really good job of filling up 45 minutes. Like I said earlier before Clement joined, I talked him into potentially hosting these going forward. So I'll work on him more with that because I think it would be kind of nice to have somebody in region kind of hosting, and it doesn't mean I won't join and participate. But this is definitely something we're going to keep continuing now that the Zoom invite's correct. I noticed that once I fixed it, we had quite a few people join that have now left. But once that's correct, we may have more attendance in the future, seeing as people can actually join the meeting. Go figure. And yeah, I think it'll continue to grow as we get part of this becomes part of the migration hub and stuff like that. It's a good opportunity for any customer to come out and just ask anything, or any potential customer to ask anything, or anybody internal to come and ask anything. That's what it's really intended for, and I think it's working out that way. So I appreciate Clement possibly taking that on in the future for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Matt will look to do that. Yeah, David. So start thinking about what interesting topics that we can talk about in the upcoming sessions. Next week I won't be able to join because I'm going to be in the US and probably will be in transit during this time.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So
yeah, I could do next week as well. The week after, I don't think I can do. Well, I don't know. I'm going to be in Palo Alto as well in a couple weeks, so.
Okay.
We'll have to figure that schedule out, but I know we got a couple guys maybe interested in it. That's great. So I think we'll close it out maybe 15 minutes early. Like I said, I think we did some good conversation now, and this is actually a really good one that maybe we even put up onto YouTube. We'll have to figure that out because I think there's some really good content here that's worth people knowing. And we've been a little bit lax in uploading content there. We had, it's over the summer and stuff to get webinars done and stuff like that. But we do have a webinar coming next week with the Oracle on VMC, and which I saw just Harold just joined right now, just as we're winding it up. Timely as ever, Harold. But I like just bugging Harold. I've known Harold for way too long. But there was a brief Harold laugh. That was good. So anyway, like I said, we'll be back here next week. I'll for sure be back here. Sounds like the Clement's going to be in the U.S. Oh yeah, I'll be on office hours for the Americas EMEA at 8 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday. And what do we say? This is Friday noon Sydney time.
Yes.
Yeah, next week. So look forward to seeing everybody back again. Maybe Harold will show up on time and can provide some content and some questions. But
I'll try.
I appreciate you coming out anyway, Harold. I know I'm busting your chops, but thanks for dropping by. So with that, like I said, thanks very much, Clement, for taking us through some of this vSAN stuff and showing some of the challenges some of our customers have had, and thank you, David, for the participation as well. And I'll look forward to talking to everybody next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, for hosting. Bye.
Next time, man.